Let me tell you something nobody puts in a travel brochure. I was sitting at a street-side plastic table in Ho Chi Minh City, drinking a 40-cent coffee that tasted better than anything I had ever ordered in a European cafe, watching the morning chaos of 10 million people beginning their day, and a man on a motorbike slowed down, looked me straight in the eyes and said, with zero shame, zero hesitation, "You are very beautiful. You want a husband?" Not a boyfriend. A husband. Before 8 in the morning. Before I had finished my coffee. And honestly, that moment told me more about Vietnam than 3 guidebooks ever could. So if you are thinking about visiting Vietnam, if you are a man wondering what the dating culture is actually like here, if you are curious about what real daily life looks like beyond the Instagram highlights and the travel blog cliches, stay with me because I have spent serious time in this country. I have talked to hundreds of people, expats, locals, women, men, and I am going to give you the full picture. The beautiful parts, the complicated parts, the parts that will make you laugh, the parts that might make you a little uncomfortable, and the parts that will genuinely make you reconsider everything you thought you knew about romance, culture, and what it means to live well. This is real life in Vietnam. Part 1. Arriving in Vietnam, the assault on the senses. The moment you step out of Tan Son Nhat International Airport in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam hits you all at once. It is not a gentle introduction. There is no warm-up period. The heat wraps around you like a second skin within about 30 seconds. The noise, the constant symphony of horns, engines, voices, and music bleeding out of open doorways, fills every inch of available air. The smell is extraordinary. A combination of street food frying in oil, exhaust, tropical flowers, and something sweet and smoky that you will never quite be able to name, but that you will spend the rest of your life trying to recreate. If you land in Hanoi, in the north, the experience is slightly different. Cooler in the winter months, more colonial in its architecture, more reserved in its energy. Hanoi moves at a different pace than Ho Chi Minh City. It breathes differently. But it hits you too, just in a quieter, more insistent way, like someone tapping you on the shoulder instead of grabbing your arm. Vietnam is a country of contrasts, and this becomes obvious before you even reach your accommodation. On the road from the airport, you will see gleaming glass skyscrapers standing directly next to crumbling French colonial buildings. You will see women in traditional AO dye dresses carrying goods on bamboo poles through streets thick with delivery scooters. You will see Buddhist temples tucked between phone repair shops and luxury brand boutiques. The country has sprinted through economic development at a pace that has compressed decades of change into just a few years, and everywhere you look, you can see the seams where the old and the new are still being stitched together. The traffic is one of the first things that every single visitor talks about, and for good reason. Traffic in Ho Chi Minh City is not like traffic anywhere else in the world. There are motorbikes, millions of them, and they do not operate by any traffic logic that will make sense to you immediately. They flow. That is the only word for it. They pour around obstacles, fill every gap, drift through red lights with a calm inevitability that should be terrifying but somehow is not. Crossing the street for the first time as a foreigner is a rite of passage. The technique, which locals will tell you with patient amusement, is to walk slowly, steadily, without hesitation, without stopping, and trust that the traffic will part around you. It does. It always does. But your heart will be hammering the first time. Within a few days, this will stop being frightening and start being one of your favorite things about the place. There is something almost meditative about the way traffic moves here. It requires a collective agreement to flow, a kind of citywide negotiation happening in real time, and once you understand that, once you stop trying to impose a Western framework of right-of-way and traffic signals onto it, it becomes almost beautiful. Part 2. The food. The real reason people keep coming back. Let me be very direct about something. The food in Vietnam might be the best food in the world for daily eating. I know that is a strong statement. I stand by it completely. I am not talking about the finest dining experience or the most technically complex cuisine. I am talking about the kind of food you eat every single day and never get tired of. The kind of food that costs almost nothing and tastes like it cost everything. The kind of food that has been refined over generations of street vendors who have been making the same dish for 20 or 30 years and have achieved a kind of perfection that no restaurant with white tablecloths can touch. Pho is the obvious starting point because it is the dish that most people know. But even if you have had pho outside of Vietnam, you have not really had pho. The broth is the soul of the dish, clear, deep, complex, built from hours of simmering bones with star anise, cinnamon, ginger, and charred onion. It is served for breakfast in Vietnam, which takes most Westerners by surprise. You sit on a low plastic stool at 6 in the morning, the city still yawning awake around you, and you eat a bowl of soup, and everything feels exactly right. But pho is just the beginning. Banh mi is a baguette sandwich that is a living remnant of French colonialism, transformed so completely by Vietnamese ingredients and technique that it barely resembles anything French anymore. It is filled with pâté, cured meats, pickled daikon and carrot, fresh cilantro, cucumber, and chili, and you can buy one from a street cart for less than the price of a mediocre coffee back home. Bun bo hu is a spicy beef noodle soup from the central city of Hue that many food people quietly consider superior to pho, though you should not say that too loudly in Hanoi. Bang zio is a sizzling rice flour crepe stuffed with pork and shrimp and bean sprouts that you eat wrapped in lettuce leaves with fresh herbs. Cao lao is a noodle dish that exists only in Hoi An, made with water drawn from specific ancient wells in the city, and the noodles have a texture and smokiness that you cannot find anywhere else on earth. The fresh herbs are what make Vietnamese food unlike anything else. Every meal comes with a plate of them: mint, perilla, Vietnamese balm, sawtooth herb, bean sprouts, and you add them yourself, building each bite the way you want it. There is an interactive quality to eating Vietnamese food, a customization, a conversation between you and the dish that makes every meal feel personal and alive. And the cost. This bears repeating. A full bowl of phi cho from a good street stall costs somewhere between $1 and $2. A banh mi costs perhaps 50 cents to $1. A full meal at a sit-down local restaurant with multiple dishes shared among a group, beer included, might come to $3 or $4 per person. This is not a country where you have to budget carefully around food. You can eat extraordinarily well every single day for almost nothing, and this changes the texture of daily life in a profound way. Food stops being a financial calculation and becomes pure pleasure. Part 3. The cost of living. Why expats never want to leave Vietnam has become one of the most popular expat destinations in Southeast Asia, and when you understand the numbers, you understand why immediately. A comfortable, modern one-bedroom apartment in Ho Chi Minh City in a good neighborhood will cost somewhere between $300 and $600 per month in rent. In Hanoi? Similar. In Da Nang or Hoi An, you can find beautiful places for even less. If you want to live like an absolute king, a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment in a luxury building with a rooftop pool, a gym, a concierge, you might pay $800 to $1,200 a month, which is still less than a studio in most major Western cities. Transportation costs almost nothing. An Uber or Grab, the Southeast Asian equivalent, across town might cost $1 or $2. A local motorbike taxi is even cheaper. If you buy your own motorbike, a second-hand Honda Wave, the workhorse of Vietnamese transportation, costs a few $100s and requires almost nothing to maintain. Healthcare is a mixed picture. Private international clinics exist and are genuinely good, particularly in Ho Chi Minh City, but they will charge you Western prices, so health insurance is important. Local healthcare is very affordable, but language barriers make it complicated for most foreigners. The overall monthly budget for a comfortable Western expat lifestyle, good apartment, eating out frequently, social activities, the occasional weekend trip, tends to run somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000 a month depending on your habits. A frugal person can manage on less. Someone who wants to live lavishly by Vietnamese standards can do so for perhaps $2,500. Compare that to the cost of a modest life in most European or North American cities, and you begin to understand the appeal. But here is the thing that the budget numbers do not capture, and it is the thing that expats always talk about when they try to explain why they stayed longer than they planned. The quality of life in Vietnam is not just about what you can afford. It is about a certain texture of daily existence, the warmth of the people, the constant activity and stimulation of the streets, the food, the coffee culture, the ease of finding community, the sense of being in a place that is alive and changing and full of energy. People come for a month and stay for a year. They stay for a year and cannot bring themselves to leave. There is something about Vietnam that gets under your skin. Part 4. The Coffee Culture, a religion with plastic chairs. If food is Vietnam's greatest gift to the world, coffee is a very close second, and I want to talk about it at length because it deserves it. Vietnam is one of the world's largest coffee producers, and the coffee culture here is unlike anything you will find in Italy, in Australia, in Scandinavia, or anywhere else that takes its coffee seriously. The Vietnamese have developed their own relationship with coffee that is completely singular. The foundation is Ca Pi Trung, egg coffee, which sounds alarming to anyone who has never had it and is genuinely one of the most extraordinary things you will ever put in your mouth. It was invented in Hanoi in the 1940s during a milk shortage, when a bartender began whipping egg yolks with sugar and condensed milk to create a thick, custard-like foam that sits on top of strong, Robusta espresso. The result is something between a dessert and a beverage, intensely sweet and rich, with a bitterness underneath from the coffee that stops it from being cloying. It is served in a small glass, usually nestled in a bowl of hot water to keep it warm, and you drink it slowly because it demands to be taken seriously. Then there is café soda, iced coffee with sweetened condensed milk, which is the daily drink of most of the country. Strong, dark, Robusta coffee drips through a small metal fin filter directly into a glass of condensed milk, and then you pour the whole thing over ice and stir. It is sweet, bitter, creamy, and cold, and it is absolutely the correct drink for a hot afternoon in the tropics. It costs about 75 cents at a street stall. It is better than anything with 4 words in its name at any international coffee chain. The culture around coffee in Vietnam is as important as the coffee itself. Coffee shops here are not places you go to quickly consume caffeine and return to work. They are places where you sit for hours. You arrive, you order, and then you simply exist in the space. You watch the street, you talk, you read. You do absolutely nothing and feel no pressure to do anything else. The concept of table turnover, of the subtle social pressure to finish your drink and free up the space, does not exist here in the same way. A coffee shop is a place of residency, not transit. The variety of coffee shops reflects every possible mood and aesthetic. There are tiny hole-in-the-wall places on back alleys where you sit on child-sized plastic stools and drink from glass cups that have been used 10,000 times. There are elaborate multi-floor establishments with rooftop terraces overlooking the city, with living walls of tropical plants and jazz playing softly in menus that go on for pages. There are garden cafes tucked behind gates in residential neighborhoods, oases of greenery and quiet. There are coffee shops designed around specific aesthetic themes: mid-century modern, French colonial, industrial chic, whimsical fairy tale, that have the production value of sets on a film location. Going to coffee in Vietnam is an event. It is something people schedule around. Asking someone to go for coffee here is essentially asking them to dedicate a meaningful portion of an afternoon to your company, and they will do so happily, because there is nowhere they would rather be. Part 5. Vietnamese women, what you actually need to know. All right, this is the part many of you have been waiting for, and I am going to treat it with the seriousness and nuance it deserves because there is a lot of misinformation floating around, a lot of fantasy, a lot of projection, and also a lot of genuine beauty and complexity in the real story of dating and relationships in Vietnam. Let me start with the cultural context because nothing makes sense without it. Vietnam is a society in rapid transition. The older generation, people who grew up under a very different economic and political reality, carries a deeply Confucian framework around family, gender roles, and relationships. In this framework, Women are expected to be the primary caregivers, to prioritize family above personal ambition, to defer to parents and husbands in major decisions, and to marry within a certain age window that feels, to Western eyes, extremely compressed. A Vietnamese woman in a small town or rural area who is not married by her mid-20s will begin to feel real social pressure. Her family will ask questions, relatives will comment. The concept of being old to marry is applied to women in their late 20s in a way that is jarring to anyone coming from a culture where 35 is considered a perfectly reasonable age to begin thinking seriously about partnership. But here is what is equally true and often overlooked. The younger generation of Vietnamese women in cities, women in their 20s and early 30s who have grown up with smartphones and social media and access to global culture, is engaged in an active, ongoing renegotiation of all of these expectations. They are studying abroad. They are building careers. They are traveling. They are watching the same shows and listening to the same music as their peers in Seoul, in London, in New York, and they are asking hard questions about what they actually want from their lives and relationships. This does not happen on television or in family conversations, because the traditional framework still governs those spaces. It happens in coffee shops and in group chats and in quiet conversations between friends. The result is a generation of women who are navigating two completely different sets of expectations simultaneously: the traditional pressures of family and culture on one hand, and their own evolving sense of identity and desire on the other. This creates a complexity that is often invisible to foreign men, who arrive with their own set of assumptions and read what they see very simply, when the reality is anything but simple. Vietnamese women, particularly in Ho Chi Minh City, are known across the region for being beautiful. This is not a controversial observation. It is something that Vietnamese people themselves say with pride. The combination of features, the graceful physical proportions, the care taken with appearance, the traditional standards of presentation, it adds up to something genuinely striking. Women here take their appearance seriously in a way that involves real effort and attention. Skincare routines are elaborate and devoted. Fashion, even casual fashion, tends toward elegance. The áo dai, the traditional long dress worn with trousers, remains a living garment here, not a museum piece. Women wear it to work, to family celebrations, to university. But beauty is surface, and I want to talk about substance. The Vietnamese women I have known and spoken with at length tend to share certain qualities that go deeper than appearance. There is an industriousness, a work ethic that is remarkable even by the standards of a region full of hardworking people. Many women here manage demanding careers, send money home to family in provinces, maintain active social lives, and still show up for relationships with genuine energy and warmth. There is a loyalty that, when it is given completely. And there is a kind of emotional intelligence born from navigating complexity, family expectations, cultural pressures, the daily negotiation of being a modern woman in a traditional society that produces people who are perceptive and adaptable in ways that are genuinely impressive. Part 6. Dating in Vietnam as a foreign man. The real picture now. If you are a foreign man thinking about dating in Vietnam, I want to give you the honest, clear-eyed version of what you are walking into, because the internet is full of both breathless enthusiasm and cynical dismissal, and neither extreme is accurate. First, the obvious reality. Foreign men receive a significant amount of attention in Vietnam, particularly Western foreign men. This is a fact. It is not entirely flattering in its explanation, and understanding the explanation matters more than simply enjoying the attention. Vietnam is a country where the income gap between locals and foreigners remains very significant. A foreign man working remotely on a Western salary is, by local standards, extremely wealthy. This creates a dynamic that is impossible to pretend does not exist. Some women, a minority but a visible one, are interested in foreign men primarily for the economic stability and opportunity that a relationship with them might provide. This is not unique to Vietnam. Versions of this dynamic exist in any country with significant economic disparity and a history of tourism. But it is more visible here, and foreign men who arrive without awareness of it can make expensive and emotionally costly mistakes. The telltale signs are not subtle once you know what to look for. A woman who moves extremely fast toward financial intimacy, borrowing money early, involving you quickly in family financial problems, escalating the relationship to commitment before you have had time to actually know each other, deserves careful attention. This is not a reason to be cynical or guarded with everyone, but it is a reason to be thoughtful. Now, and this is equally important, the majority of women you will meet are not operating from this framework at all. The vast majority of Vietnamese women who are open to dating foreign men are doing so from a place of genuine interest, genuine attraction, genuine curiosity about someone from a different world. They are drawn to foreign men for the same reasons people anywhere are drawn to partners from different cultures. The novelty, the adventure, the different perspective, the feeling of being seen outside the box of cultural expectation. Many Vietnamese women find that foreign men, particularly those who are genuinely interested in Vietnamese culture, who make an effort with the language, who show respect and curiosity, treat them with a kind of individual attention and appreciation that feels different from what they have experienced in local dating. The dating landscape has been dramatically reshaped by apps. Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge all operate in Vietnam and are widely used, particularly in Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi. As a foreign man in a major Vietnamese city, you will find the apps extremely active. Match rates for foreign men tend to be higher here than in most Western cities, which is partly genuine interest and partly a reality of the demographic. There are many educated, attractive, English-speaking Vietnamese women who are specifically curious about connecting with someone from abroad. What they are looking for, almost universally, is not what the internet stereotype suggests. They want substance. They want a man who is genuinely curious about their country and their culture, who can hold a conversation, who shows warmth and humor, who respects their family even if he does not yet understand all its dynamics. The fantasy of arriving as a foreign man and having beautiful women throw themselves at you because of your passport alone is both offensive to Vietnamese women and, frankly, not the experience most men actually have. The men who do well here long-term are the ones who engage seriously. Language matters more than most foreign men think. Even a small amount of Vietnamese, a greeting, a phrase of thanks, the ability to order food in Vietnamese, creates a completely disproportionate positive response. Vietnamese is a tonal language and notoriously difficult for speakers of Western languages, and Vietnamese people are aware of this difficulty. When a foreigner tries anyway, when they massacre the tones with cheerful determination and keep trying, it reads as genuine respect and effort, and it is received with enormous warmth. Part 7. Family. The invisible architecture of every relationship. You cannot understand dating and relationships in Vietnam without understanding the family, because the family is not background to a relationship here. It is the foundation, the framework, the governing institution. When you date a Vietnamese woman seriously, you are not just dating her. You are dating her family. This is not a metaphor. In Vietnamese culture, the family unit, particularly the parents, retains an authority in an adult child's life that is difficult to convey to someone from an individualist Western background. Major decisions, who to marry, where to live, career choices, financial decisions, are not made by Vietnamese adults in isolation. They are made in consultation with, or sometimes in deference to, the family. A Vietnamese woman who falls in love with a foreign man and wants to pursue that relationship seriously will face a conversation with her parents that carries real weight, and her parents' opinion will matter to her in a way that is not just social pressure, but genuine emotional loyalty. This is not a weakness. I want to be very clear about that. The family-centeredness of Vietnamese culture produces people who are deeply rooted, who have a network of support that most Westerners have lost, who understand loyalty and obligation in a way that, once you experience it from inside a Vietnamese family, you may find yourself envying. The warmth of Vietnamese family hospitality, the way guests are fed, cared for, incorporated into the group, is something that visitors describe with genuine emotion. But it creates dynamics that foreign partners need to understand. Vietnamese women will often want to know relatively quickly whether a man is serious, whether he is marriage material, because the stakes of bringing someone home to family are high. Casual dating exists, particularly in cities and among the younger generation, but it sits uncomfortably alongside family expectations in a way that creates real tension for many women. A Vietnamese woman who is genuinely interested in a foreign man is often also quietly running a calculation about whether this is something her parents could eventually accept, whether this man shows the qualities, stability, respect, seriousness, that would make that conversation possible. For foreign men, this means that moving slowly and showing genuine interest in a woman's life, her background, her family, not as a strategy, but as authentic curiosity, is enormously important. It also means being honest about your intentions from the beginning, because the consequences of ambiguity fall much more heavily on Vietnamese women than on foreign men. The concept of face, saving face, maintaining face, is central to Vietnamese social life and shapes almost every interaction. Making someone feel embarrassed or disrespected in front of others, even unintentionally, is a serious social transgression. Understanding this helps decode moments that might otherwise feel confusing. Why a Vietnamese woman might not say directly that she is uncomfortable with something. Why disagreement is often expressed obliquely rather than frontally. Why maintaining harmony in social situations takes precedence over individual expression of grievance. Part 8. The Cities. Ho Chi Minh. City versus Hanoi versus everywhere in between Vietnam is not one place. It is a country that stretches over 1,600 kilometers from north to south, and the differences between regions are significant enough that travelers sometimes feel like they have visited entirely different countries within the borders of one. Ho Chi Minh City, still called Saigon by most of its residents, a name that persists 40-plus years after it was officially changed, which tells you something about the character of the place, is the engine of the country. It is fast, loud, commercially ambitious, constantly under construction, and enormously energetic. It is the city of entrepreneurs and hustlers, and nightlife and ambition. People come to Saigon to make money, to make things happen, to be part of the forward movement of a country that has decided it is going places. The social scene is expansive and international. There are neighborhoods, Thao Dien, Phu Mai Hung, District 1, that are full of expats, international restaurants, rooftop bars, coffee shops that would not look out of place in Brooklyn or Melbourne. The city never quite stops. Even at 3 in the morning, the streets are not empty. Hanoi, in contrast, is a city of history and culture, and a certain northern pride that expresses itself as reserve. Hanoians will tell you, with some justification, that their city has more depth, more tradition, more authentic Vietnamese culture than the commercially driven South. There is truth in this. The old quarter of Hanoi, with its 36 ancient streets each historically dedicated to a specific trade, is genuinely one of the most atmospheric urban environments in Asia. The lakes, Hoan Kiem in the center, West Lake to the northwest, give Hanoi a breathability that Ho Chi Minh City, with its density, lacks. The food culture in Hanoi is arguably more refined and traditional. The pace is slower. People seem to take more time for thought. The social dynamic in Hanoi is also more conservative. This is a generalization, but it is one that most long-term Vietnam residents would agree with. Women in Hanoi tend to be more guarded, more traditional in their expectations around dating, more family-oriented in their orientation. The city is the political and cultural capital, closer to the Confucian roots of northern Vietnamese society, and this shows in how people present themselves and what they prioritize. Da Nang is the third city that serious Vietnam travelers always mention, and it has become increasingly relevant in the last decade as it has developed from a mid-sized port city into one of the most livable places in the country. It sits in the center of Vietnam, with beautiful beaches. Mai Kay Beach is world-class, genuinely, on one side, and mountains, and the Ba Na Hills on the other. The city is clean and well-organized in a way that Ho Chi Minh City, wonderful as it is, definitively is not. It is calmer. It has a growing expat community, excellent food, affordable living, and a pace of life that many people find ideal. For remote workers and expats who want quality of life without the intensity of Saigon, Da Nang has become the answer. Hoi An deserves its own mention because it is unlike anywhere else in Vietnam and, honestly, unlike anywhere else in the world. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Town, an ancient trading port whose old town has been preserved in a way that is genuinely remarkable. Walking through Hoi An at dusk when the lanterns are lit and the Thu Bon River reflects orange and gold and the streets narrow to alleys of yellow-painted walls is one of those travel moments that stays with you permanently. The town is small, the food is extraordinary. This is where Keo Lao comes from, where white rose dumplings were invented, and it has a romantic, slightly dreamlike quality that makes people stay longer than they planned. Hue, an hour and a half north of Da Nang, is the ancient imperial capital, a city of extraordinary historical depth that is criminally undervisited relative to its significance. The citadel, modeled on the Forbidden City in Beijing, sits in the city center. Royal tombs are scattered through the surrounding countryside. The cuisine of Hue, royal court cuisine developed to satisfy the palates of emperors, is some of the most complex and refined food in the country. And the Perfume River, which runs through the city, is genuinely one of the most beautiful waterways in Southeast Asia. Part 9. What daily life actually looks like. The rhythm of Vietnam. I want to talk about the texture of a normal day in Vietnam, because this is what you do not get from the highlight reels, and it is the thing that actually determines whether you will love living somewhere. Mornings in Vietnam begin early, really early. By 5:30 or 6, the streets in residential neighborhoods are already busy, women setting up street food stalls, older people doing Tai Chi in the parks, the first coffee drinkers claiming their plastic stools. The early morning has a particular quality of light and sound that is entirely specific to Vietnam, golden, humid, accompanied by the sound of roosters even in the city, the distant chanting from a nearby temple, the first wave of motorbikes building toward the morning rush. Breakfast is a serious meal here, not an afterthought. Whether it is pho or banh mi or com tam, broken rice with grilled pork, a fried egg, and pickled vegetables, the morning meal is eaten with attention and care. The Vietnamese do not eat at their desks or grab something on the go. They sit down, they eat properly. This commitment to meals as social, attentive experiences, not fuel consumed on the way to something else, is something that visitors from rushed, working breakfast cultures find deeply appealing. Midday is when the heat peaks, and there is a wisdom in how Vietnamese people handle it. In the South especially, there is a culture of rest after lunch, not a formal siesta in the Spanish sense, but a general understanding that the hours between 12 and 2 are for retreat, for napping in a hammock or on a folding cot behind a shop counter, for slowing down. The streets genuinely quiet. Then the afternoon begins again, and the city rebuilds its energy toward evening. Evenings are spectacular. The temperature drops, not dramatically, but enough, and the city emerges. Families sit outside. Food stalls that were packed up during the day reappear. The coffee shops fill. People wander. There is a social quality to Vietnamese evenings, a collective pleasure in simply being outside, being together, occupying public space, that feels like something most Western cities have lost entirely. You can walk through any residential neighborhood at 7 or 8 in the evening and feel the warmth of it, the humanness of it. The weekend markets, night markets, and weekend walking streets that exist in most Vietnamese cities are a genuine expression of this social culture. The Ben Thanh Night Market in Ho Chi Minh City, the Hoi An Night Market along the riverside, the weekend walking street around Hoan Kiem Lake in Hanoi. These are not tourist traps, though tourists do go to them. They are places where Vietnamese people actually spend their weekends, eating and shopping and walking and meeting friends, living their lives in the beautiful, chaotic, affectionate way that Vietnam seems to produce naturally. Part 10. The Expat Life. The good, the complicated, and the honest truth. The expat community in Vietnam, particularly in Ho Chi Minh City, is one of the largest and most established in Southeast Asia. There are tens of thousands of foreigners living here long-term from all over the world, and the community has developed an infrastructure to match. International schools, Western grocery stores, expat-focused co-working spaces, Facebook groups with memberships in the tens of thousands, weekend sports leagues, regular social events. This can be a tremendous resource, particularly when you first arrive and are trying to understand how the city works. The expat community holds an enormous amount of practical knowledge: how to set up a bank account, which neighborhoods to live in, which apps to use for transportation and food delivery, which clinics are good, which schools are best. People in this community tend to be generous with information because everyone remembers being new. But the expat community also has a shadow side, and it would be dishonest not to mention it. In any city with a large, established expat community, there is a risk of creating a parallel life that barely intersects with the actual country you are living in. The expat bubble, where you live in an expat neighborhood, eat at restaurants catering to expats, socialize almost exclusively with other foreigners, never learn more than a few words of the local language, is a real and common thing, and it represents a profound waste of the experience of being somewhere extraordinary. The expats who seem genuinely happiest in Vietnam long-term are the ones who have maintained connections in both worlds, who have Vietnamese friends, who have made some effort with the language, who eat local food more often than they eat Western food, who understand something real about Vietnamese history and culture. Not because they have gone native in some romanticized way, but because they have actually engaged with where they are, and that engagement has made the experience richer and more sustainable. The visa situation in Vietnam has historically been one of the more restrictive in Southeast Asia for long-term stays, though the rules have been in flux and have become somewhat more foreigner-friendly in recent years. There is no dedicated digital nomad visa in the way that some other countries have introduced, though this continues to evolve. Most long-term foreign residents use business visas or work permits tied to employment with registered companies. This is something worth researching carefully and recently before you make any long-term plans, because the situation changes. Part 11. Understanding Vietnamese History. Why it matters for everything else. I want to spend some time on history because you cannot really understand the Vietnamese people, their resilience, their pride, their particular relationship with foreigners, their intensity, without understanding what they have been through. Vietnam has a history of extraordinary violence and upheaval that stretches back thousands of years, but the 20th century alone is enough to explain a great deal. The French colonial period, which lasted roughly a century and was marked by systematic extraction and cultural suppression, ended only in 1954 with the French defeat at Dien Bien Phu, a victory against a major European colonial power that still resonates with pride in Vietnamese national identity. Then came the division of the country and the decades of conflict that the Vietnamese call the American War and the Americans call the Vietnam War, which ended in 1975. The death toll was catastrophic. Estimates range into the millions. The environmental damage from chemical warfare persists to this day, and the reunification was followed by further hardship, conflict with Cambodia and China, international isolation, the economic austerity of the collectivist period. Before the Doi Moi reforms of 1986 began the country's dramatic economic opening. This compressed history of suffering and resilience has produced a national character that is immediately felt by visitors, even if they cannot quite name it. There is a toughness here, a determination, a capacity to keep going that shows up in everything from the work ethic to the cheerful stoicism with which people handle difficulty. There is also a complexity in how Vietnamese people think about foreigners, about Western foreigners in particular, that is layered with historical memory even when it is not explicitly stated. Most Vietnamese people will not bring up the war with you, and they will be warm and welcoming regardless. But the history is present in the space between things, and acknowledging it, even just through the humility of recognizing that you are a guest in a place with a complicated relationship with the West, matters. The War Remnants Museum in Ho Chi Minh City is not easy to visit. It is graphic, it is sorrowful, and it presents the war from a perspective that most American and Australian visitors have never encountered. Go anyway. It is essential. The Cu Chi Tunnels, where the Viet Cong built an extraordinary network of underground passages to survive American bombing, are similarly important. Understanding what happened here is part of respecting where you are. What is genuinely remarkable, and it bears saying clearly, is that despite everything, Vietnamese people do not carry visible resentment toward American or Western visitors. There is a pragmatism and a forward-looking quality to the culture that seems to have processed historical trauma without allowing it to curdle into bitterness toward individuals. Vietnam normalized relations with the United States in 1995, and the relationship has grown significantly since then. American tourists are welcomed warmly. This is not a small thing, and it says something real about the character of the Vietnamese people. Part 12. The Spiritual Life. Temples, pagodas, and the texture of belief. Vietnam's spiritual landscape is rich, syncretic, and easy to underestimate if you approach it as simply a backdrop for photography. Religion here is a living thing, present in daily life in ways that are constant and unobtrusive and profound. The dominant religious tradition is a blend of Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism that the Vietnamese call the Three Teachings, mixed with elements of ancestor veneration that are deeply embedded in family culture. Most Vietnamese homes have a small ancestor altar, a shelf or a table with photographs of deceased relatives, offerings of fruit and incense, a presence that keeps the dead woven into the fabric of daily life. On important dates, on the lunar calendar's significant days, on anniversaries of deaths, families gather and make offerings and maintain the connection with those who have gone before. The pagodas and temples scattered throughout every Vietnamese city and town are not static monuments. They are active places of worship, busy with worshippers burning incense, making offerings, consulting monks, praying for health and family and success in business. The smell of incense is everywhere in Vietnam, drifting from temple doorways, from the small shrines tucked into the corners of shops and restaurants, from the home altars of private houses. It becomes one of the foundational sensory associations with the country. The Jade Emperor Pagoda in Ho Chi Minh City, the Temple of Literature in Hanoi, the Thien Mu Pagoda in Hue, the Marble Mountains near Da Nang. These are places where history and spirituality and beauty converge in ways that are genuinely moving, and where, if you visit with attention and respect, you feel something real about the depth of Vietnamese civilization. There is also a thriving Catholic community, a legacy of the French colonial period, that has created some of the most beautiful churches in Southeast Asia, including the Notre Dame Cathedral of Saigon, which has stood in the heart of Ho Chi Minh City since 1880, and the Pink Church of Tan Dinh, a photograph of which has become one of the most shared images of the city. Part 13. Navigating Romance and Relationships. The Practical Wisdom. Let me bring this back to the subject of relationships and give you the most practical, honest guidance I can. If you are a man visiting Vietnam for a short time, a week or two, and you are hoping to meet someone, to have genuine human connection, you absolutely can. The apps work. The social scene in the cities is accessible. Vietnamese people are warm and curious about foreigners. But please go in with realistic expectations about what a meaningful connection built over a week can actually become. And please be honest with the people you meet about the nature and duration of your stay. The asymmetry of power in these interactions, you can leave, they cannot follow as easily, is real, and the casual tourist romance has a long history of being significantly more consequential for the Vietnamese participant than for the foreign one. If you are considering a longer stay, if you are thinking seriously about Vietnam as a place to build a life or a significant relationship, then the most important thing I can tell you is to slow down and learn. Learn the language, even imperfectly. Learn the history, learn the food, learn to navigate the city on a motorbike, to find the local coffee shops, to understand what family means here and why it shapes everything. The men who build genuinely good lives in Vietnam, with genuine relationships, genuine community, genuine belonging, are the ones who committed to understanding the place rather than simply consuming it. The women who are available for serious relationships in Vietnam are not waiting passively to be discovered by foreign men. They are living full, complex, demanding lives, and the question they are implicitly asking of any potential partner, foreign or local, is whether you are worth making room for in that life. The answer has nothing to do with your passport or your bank account, and everything to do with your character, your curiosity, your capacity for respect and genuine connection. There is a concept in Vietnamese that I think about often in this context. The word duyen, sometimes translated as fate or predestined affinity, is used to describe the connection that exists between people who were meant to find each other. It is not a passive concept. It acknowledges the role of effort and intention in realizing a connection that was always possible. Duyen requires that you show up, that you try, that you be present and real. It is a beautiful way of thinking about human connection, and it feels very Vietnamese, romantic without being naive, hopeful without being passive. Part 14. The things that will surprise you. The honest, small details. Vietnam will surprise you in ways that no list can fully prepare you for, but I want to share some of the ones that I find most telling. The noise. Vietnam is not a quiet country, and if you value silence, you will need to make peace with this quickly. Karaoke is a national passion, and it is performed with full volume and full commitment from early evening until quite late, including on weeknights, including in residential neighborhoods. Weddings, funerals, and celebrations in Vietnam involve sound systems of startling power and the willingness to use them at hours that will seem antisocial to anyone accustomed to Western noise ordinances. This is not rudeness. It is a different relationship with shared space and sound that has its own internal logic. You adjust, and then one day you notice you have stopped adjusting and simply stopped noticing, and that is when you know Vietnam has gotten into you. The directness about physical appearance. Vietnamese people will comment on your appearance with a candor that can feel shocking in the moment. "You've gotten fat" is an observation that might be offered affectionately by someone who has not seen you in a few months. "You look thin today" is a compliment. "You have a big nose" might be offered as a descriptive observation with no negative intent. This comes from a different relationship with the body and with the social function of commenting on it. It is not intended as cruelty and is rarely received as such by Vietnamese people, but it takes adjustment. The rain. The rainy season in Ho Chi Minh City, which runs roughly from May to November, produces afternoon thunderstorms of extraordinary intensity. The sky turns green-black in minutes. The rain comes down in sheets. The streets flood within 30 minutes. And then an hour later, the sun comes back out, and everything steams gently, and life continues. These storms are spectacular, and actually one of the things many expats say they miss when they leave. The generosity. Vietnamese hospitality, when you experience it at the family level, is overwhelming in the most wonderful way. You will be fed until you physically cannot eat anymore. You will be urged to eat more after that. Tea will appear, then fruit, then more tea. There is a deep cultural pleasure in providing for a guest that expresses itself through abundance, and resisting it offends the spirit of the thing. Conclusion. Vietnam is not a simple place. It rewards the traveler who comes with patience, curiosity, and humility, who is willing to be confused, to be surprised, to be wrong about assumptions they arrived with, and to keep going anyway. It is a country of extraordinary beauty and extraordinary complexity, of a people who have survived things that would break most societies and emerged with their warmth and humor and appetite for life, not just intact, but somehow intensified. The romance of Vietnam, and there is genuine romance here in every sense of the word, is not something you find by following a map or a dating profile. It is something you stumble into at a plastic table at 6 in the morning with a cup of café soda, when the city is waking up around you and the light is doing something magical, and someone on a motorbike slows down and says something that makes you laugh, and you realize that you have arrived somewhere real. Come with an open heart. Leave your assumptions at the airport. And don't watch this video near your wife. I'm Julia. I'll see you in the next one.